Winterfell, a few minutes earlier. It had been less than 10 minutes before Dany was escorted to her room in Winterfell by Davos and Arya, accompanied by Jorah, two unsullied guards, and two Dothraki, along with Missandei and Tyrion. Dany did notice that Sansa had pulled Jon away so that they could speak in private. I have a feeling I know what it is about, Dany thought as she reached the door. The entire journey was uncomfortably silent. Dany wanted to speak to Arya, but no words left her mouth, only the sound of their footsteps striking the hard, cold floor of the castle hallway. The truth was that she felt unease at the girl moving beside Sir Davos. Dany glanced at Tyrion, who met her gaze with a look that reassured her. Everything will be alright. It had been Tyrion, her hand, who told her back at Dragonstone before Jon arrived that the North was a different creature altogether. They looked to their own, and a southern ruler, or in Dany's case, a foreign one, would find it immensely difficult to hold the region. He had further explained that demanding Jon as king in the north, bend the knee, would cause tension given the recent history between their houses. And it went as well as it did in our first encounter, Dany reflected, looking away from Tyrion. But I am the queen of the Seven Kingdoms, and he is the king in the north, one of the kingdoms I intend to rule. Bending the knee? There was no choice for me but to insist. I want to unite the realm, not one that is fractured. This is your room, Arya remarked, her voice edged with restrained anger as she turned and placed a hand on the door. This was the woman Jon had given up his crown for, a crown the North had given him to lead them in this dark time. It felt as if he had thrown away all he had been given. She and Dany held each other's gaze for several seconds, neither looking away, before Arya continued. It may be cold in the north, Your Grace, but the pipes running through the walls provide enough warmth. This room is the warmest there is. Thank you, Lady Stark, Dany replied with a nod before breaking eye contact. A part of her felt relieved. It had seemed as though Arya was staring straight through her. Dany turned and nodded to Grey Worm, the commander of her Unsullied. He opened the door while the Dothraki took their positions on either side of the stone frame. Arya stepped aside and stood with Sir Davos as Dany paused at the threshold, then turned back to face her. She had seen Arya embrace Jon tightly the moment he dismounted his horse, had seen the pure love in her eyes before that gaze shifted to her when Jon introduced them. That was when Dany saw the anger. It was something Jon had already warned her about, something Tyrion and Jorah had also cautioned her about, that there would be resentment toward a southern ruler forcing the north to bow once more. Jon made a choice, Lady Stark, Dany began, facing the younger girl. He bent the knee willingly, and a choice that, well, you made for him, Your Grace, Arya cut in, her expression unreadable as her eyes bored into Dany. At least that's what I heard, and Arya spoke the truth. After Littlefinger's death, Sansa had shown her the message Jon sent by Raven. Arya had read it 4 times before looking up at Sansa in disbelief, questioning how Jon could have bent the knee so easily. Later that night, they had gone to Bran, who told them everything that had happened between Dany and Jon. You heard? Tyrion interjected, confusion evident in his tone. What have you heard? Many things, Arya answered, still watching Dany before stepping back. You need your rest, Your Grace. The other Northern Lords will gather in the Great Hall in an hour. Dany hesitated before continuing. She knew convincing the North would not be easy, no matter what Jon had promised. She knew the pain her father, the Mad King, had inflicted upon Westeros, especially the North, with what happened to Brandon and Rickard Stark, followed by her brother's abduction and assault of Lyanna Stark. There was much to repair, and it had to begin with the war against the Night King. Dany exhaled slowly before concluding. I will rest for an hour, Lady Stark. Ordinarily, Arya would have corrected Dany for calling her Lady Stark, but she held her tongue. She was still angry, just as Sansa was, about Jon's decision. Yet, seeing him again had overwhelmed her. She had pushed those angry feelings aside, rushed to him, and embraced him tightly. Sansa will tell him how angry we are, Arya thought as she studied the Dragon Queen before her. She exhaled, then turned to Jorah. I'm sure Lady Mormont will be glad to see you. Jorah recognized the mocking edge in her tone, but his heart still raced at the thought of meeting his cousin. Would she want me gone? Would she hate me? Would she kill me? He wondered. Straightening himself, he replied that meeting his cousin would be interesting, but at another time. Arya inclined her head before taking her leave with Davos. Dany exhaled, aware of the work ahead to mend relations with the North. She gave a small nod as Arya and Davos departed, then turned to Jorah, Tyrion, Missandei, and Grey Worm. The Dothraki guards remained stationed at either side of her door. Resting her hand on the stone frame, she issued orders to Grey Worm and was about to turn to Jorah to discuss acclimating the Dothraki and Unsullied, who were encamped outside Winterfell's walls, to the cold. Before she could finish, a sudden cool breeze rushed out from her chamber. A chill crept up her spine. Daenerys turned her head toward the inner wall. From the corner of her eyes, she noticed Arya halt abruptly before turning back, her eyes widening. "Something's wrong," Arya murmured. Then everything happened too quickly to comprehend. Dany caught movement from her left. Inside the room, near the large bed, steel rang as blades were drawn. Jorah shouted, "My queen!" Grey Worm shoved Missandei aside as Tyrion cried out, "No!" And yet, to Dany, everything slowed. She stared into lilac eyes, felt the icy grip on her arm as she was wrenched away from Grey Worm's hold, saw the silver hair, the unmistakable madness, the cruel sneer. She was spun around as an arm clamped around her throat, dragging her backward into the room. A hand pressed hard against her abdomen and squeezed. "Ah!" she cried out, gasping as the grip around her neck tightened. "Who is that?" Tyrion demanded, his voice tight with alarm as he struggled to see the man restraining his queen. Grey Worm and the Dothraki surged forward, forcing him aside as he moved closer to the wall, trying to make sense of the crazed figure. "Davos!" Arya barked as she darted past Missandei, whom Grey Worm had pulled to safety beside Tyrion. Call Jon now!" Davos gave a sharp nod and rushed off. Arya stepped forward, needle drawn, taking position beside Jorah on the left of the ragged man. The intruder's face was marred by burns, patches of silver hair singed away to reveal scarred scalp beneath. "Where am I?" he growled in Dany's ear as her heart raced. The one thought running through her mind was that the man holding her was dead. She knew he was dead because she had seen it happen. She had watched Khal Drogo pour molten gold over his head. Daenerys remembered the screams of pain from him, from her brother, from Viserys Targaryen. "I remember you standing there with a smug look," he snarled. "I remember you standing there while I died. The gods must be kind to bring me back. They must be kind to grant me revenge on you, sister." "Sister?" Arya questioned, glancing at Jorah, who swallowed hard while holding his sword out, its point aimed at Viserys. "You died," Jorah muttered. His words made Grey Worm, Arya, Missandei, and Tyrion glance at him in confusion. I was there. I saw you die, Viserys." "Viserys," Tyrion echoed as the Dragon Queen's terrified eyes shifted toward him. "Viserys Targaryen." "Let her go," Grey Worm commanded, leveling his spear at Viserys' shoulder while the two Dothraki guards flanked him. None of them dared make a move with their queen so close to danger. Viserys stepped back, further into the room, tightening his hold as if ready to snap Daenerys' neck. "You took my army, didn't you, Dany?" Viserys hissed into her ear. "Where are we now, dear sister?" "Winterfell." "You came to the usurper's dogs?" Viserys spat into her ear before sneering. "You came to..." Before he could finish, a cold breeze swept through the room, followed by a sharp gasp. Those facing the bed, one of the Dothraki, Grey Worm, Missandei, and Tyrion, stared wide-eyed toward the corner, where a figure appeared out of thin air. Viserys turned his head at the sound. Distracted, Jorah and Arya, who had been facing away from the disturbance, seized the moment. Dropping their swords with a loud clatter, Jorah yanked Daenerys free and shoved her toward Missandei before he and Arya tackled Viserys to the ground. Missandei pulled Dany back, just as Grey Worm, snapping out of his shock, turned toward Viserys, shouting at Arya and Jorah to release him. "I am the rightful king! I am the rightful king!" Viserys screamed as the Dothraki guard and Grey Worm moved to strike, their blades hovering at his throat while Arya and Jorah held him down. Stop! Daenerys cried, staring at her brother with wide, disbelieving eyes. Don't kill him. The weapons halted inches from Viserys' neck. Tyrion, trembling, stepped forward, grasping the wooden bed frame for support. Instead of looking at the raving man, his gaze fixed on the young woman in the corner. Tyrion barely registered Dany ordering Jorah and Arya to take Viserys to the dungeons. He barely heard her call his name. His attention was entirely on the girl as he moved toward her, step by unsteady step. The young woman stammered. With flowing blonde hair, green eyes, and a blood-stained dress, she stared at those before her before lowering her gaze to the dwarf approaching. I was on a boat. How? Tyrion recoiled slightly, trembling. Hearing footsteps behind him, he turned to see the Dothraki advancing toward them. The girl flinched and stepped back, gasping. Stop! Stop! He yelled. Halt! Dany ordered, and the Dothraki immediately froze. Tyrion turned back to the young woman, his face pale as parchment. Lord Tyrion, who is Uncle Tyrion? The young woman whispered. Tyrion clutched the bed for balance as his heart pounded. Ignoring Dany's question, a name escaped his lips. Myrcella? How? I heard you. I felt myself die, Myrcella murmured. I was in father's arms, and I saw. Tears welled in her eyes as she collapsed to her knees. Tyrion rushed forward. My dead niece. How can she be here? The thought that she might have been a White Walker flickered through his mind, but vanished just as quickly. Her eyes lacked the telltale blue glow. He gathered her into her arms as she sobbed, murmuring that she remembered dying. Warmth radiated from her body. Lord Tyrion, Daenerys pressed, approaching him. Tyrion pulled back, tears streaming down his cheeks. He cupped Myrcella's face, smiling through disbelief as he felt her warmth. Then he turned to face his queen. Your Grace, he began shakily, though his eyes drifted back to Myrcella. I am proud to introduce you to. His voice faltered. Fear gripped him, the fear that she might vanish like a dream. He pulled her into another embrace, laughter bubbling up through his tears. Whatever gods there are, old or new, thank you, he breathed. Drawing back again, he wiped her tears gently. You're real. You're real. I thought this was the afterlife, Myrcella confessed. When I saw you, uncle, I thought you had died as well. Am I in the afterlife? This is real, my niece, Tyrion assured her softly. Niece? Daenerys repeated, her brows knitting together. She glanced at Missandei, equally puzzled. Lord Tyrion, I demand an explanation. Myrcella Hill, Myrcella interjected quietly. Tyrion's eyes widened. Did she know the truth? I know everything, uncle, she continued. I know about father. I know the truth about father and mother. I knew when I died. Your Grace, Tyrion addressed Daenerys, his voice unsteady as he pushed aside his confusion. I present to you my niece, Myrcella Lannister. He swallowed hard. I don't know how, Your Grace, but this is my niece. My dead niece. Daenerys stood in stunned silence, struggling to process what she had witnessed. First her brother, now Tyrion's dead niece. And it was not only Winterfell where the impossible was unfolding. Across the realm, the dead were returning to life for no apparent reason. The same occurred in the Free Cities, in Karth, and in countless other places. Those attuned to magic felt a great disturbance ripple through the unseen planes, an event that triggered a powerful backlash, restoring both the virtuous and the vile to life. In King's Landing, Cersei stood in her chambers, sipping wine as she watched King's Landing beneath the midday sun. Sudden noise behind her made her stiffen. Narrowing her eyes at the sound, she turned while calling for the thing that had once been known as the mountain. Her breath caught as she stared at the figure before her. The goblet she had been holding slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floor. Her son, her dead son, Joffrey. A scream tore from her throat as she staggered back, hands outstretched, calling frantically for Sir Gregor. The armored giant strode into the room just as Joffrey turned. Confusion etched across his face. His fear mounted when he saw the towering knight, the faint blue tinge of its skin visible through the gaps in his helm. "Mother!" Joffrey cried, stumbling backward until he hit the edge of the bed and fell onto the feathered mattress. "Mother, what is he?" The monstrosity reached for him. "Mother!" "Stop!" Cersei shouted, staring at the boy. He looked exactly like Joffrey, down to the clothes he had worn on his wedding day. Then the stench hit her, blood and vomit on his clothes. No, I recognized those clothes, the same he wore, the same as when he died. Her mind raced. She remembered the white Jon Snow had brought before her. "I saw the dead," she whispered to herself, "and my son is dead. My son is—" "Mother!" Joffrey pleaded, scrambling across the bed, scrambling toward her. You're not Joffrey," Cersei murmured, terror flooding her. "You're not my son." "Mother!" Joffrey screamed as he scrambled to his feet and rushed toward her. "Sir Gregor!" Cersei shrieked. All she saw was a white charging at her. She had stood unflinching before monsters before, but now she was simply a mother faced with something impossible and horrifying. "Sir Gregor!" she cried again. The mountain obeyed. Striding forward, he drew his sword and, in one swift motion, brought it crashing down on Joffrey. The god's eye. At that same time, Lyanna felt damp soil beneath her as she groaned. The last thing she remembered was a flash of light, followed by a tunnel. And then before that, I remember Ned. I was in the tower. There was Ned. I remember he burst in and promise me, Lyanna whispered as she rolled onto her back and stared at the cloudy sky. Snowflakes drifted down onto her. She focused on one as it gently landed on her bare arm and melted from the warmth of her skin. She closed her eyes and recalled Ned holding her child. She remembered begging him to protect her son. "Promise me, Ned." Lyanna opened her eyes as she recalled Ned agreeing that he would take her son as his bastard and raise him at Winterfell. "Ned," Lyanna murmured, staring up at the clouds as a cool breeze brushed past her. She shivered before the stench of blood entered her nostrils. Looking down, she began to pant when she saw the entire lower half of her cream-colored nightgown, along with parts of her legs, covered in dried blood. Lyanna gagged slightly at the smell as she slowly pushed herself to her feet. She scanned her surroundings. There were tall grass and weeds everywhere, before her gaze fixed on the island in the distance, lying in the middle of the lake. The Isle of Faces, she realized, looking away. Rhaegar. Seeing the place where she had married the prince forced Lyanna to relive the moment when Sir Arthur Dane had come to her in the tower. She remembered the devastation on his face, the same look he and Rhaegar had worn when they told her of the Mad King killing Brandon and her father. Lyanna's thoughts immediately turned to Ned. She had been about to ask if Ned had died when the Kingsguard knight revealed, in a broken voice, that it was Rhaegar who had fallen, that Robert Baratheon had killed her husband. Tears streamed down Lyanna's cheeks as she recalled collapsing to her knees in grief. She had lost her older brother and her father, and now she was a widow with the prince's child. As Lyanna stared at the Isle of Faces, her hands instinctively settled on her abdomen. "My son, Jon, I'm coming. I'm certain that Ned has taken good care of you." And another memory surged forward, one of the gravest news she had ever heard. It had been Sir Gerald Hightower, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, along with Sir Arthur Dane, who had delivered it. "That monster killed Elia, Aegon, and Rhaenys," Lyanna whispered, shaking her head before staring back at the Isle. I remember. I wanted my child to have another name. I wanted Jon, but Rhaegar wanted..." Before she could continue, Lyanna heard a rustle behind her. Turning, her eyes widened as if she had seen a ghost. A silver-haired man stood with his back to her. She watched as he slowly turned his head from left to right, his hair streaked with red. Lyanna's heart began to race as she took a step forward, wondering what was happening. She recognized the armor. She recognized everything about the man standing before her. Yet recognition did nothing to prepare her for the moment he turned around. Their eyes locked, both filled with disbelief. Lyanna's gaze dropped to his chestplate, where the armor was visibly cracked, the three-headed dragon sigil ruined, the rubies lining its edges, and the dragon's eyes missing. Her eyes shot back to his face as they stood frozen several feet apart. Rhaegar? Lyanna breathed before rushing toward him. She laughed and cried at once as she watched him step forward, then hesitate, before she leapt into his arms. Lyanna, my Lyanna, Rhaegar murmured, tears in his eyes as he held her tightly. Is this the afterlife? Is this... Suddenly, both of them turned their heads toward the lake surrounding the Isle of Faces. Their eyes widened as a blue-hued breach tore open in the air. They stepped back, hearts racing, as Rhaegar instinctively pushed Lyanna behind him and reached for the pommel of his missing sword. It was then he remembered. His grip on his sword had loosened the moment Robert slammed his war hammer into his chest. Step back, Lyanna, Rhaegar urged as they watched the breach close, just after a woman's scream echoed from within. Son of a bitch! Buffy shouted as she slammed onto the soft, grass-covered ground near the lake's bank. The pair exchanged confused glances before rushing toward the mysterious woman. Still holding hands, they ran, uncertain whether this was a dream or the afterlife itself. Rhaegar wanted to believe this was real, that he was truly real. But I died, he thought. I remember I died. And yet, he could not deny the blood rushing in his ears as he ran. Lyanna's hand in his. He glanced at her and felt warmth, just as he had once felt with Elia. Elia, how long has it been? Months? Days? Years? Are you safe? Are you and my children safe? The frantic pounding of his heart made him question whether he was still dead. Lyanna, equally confused, glanced at her husband as they approached the groaning woman who was slowly rising to her feet. Rhaegar and Lyanna came to a halt as the blonde woman stood upright and stared at them, then looked around with a bewildered expression. My lady? Rhaegar called as Lyanna studied the stranger with curiosity. Buffy turned back to them and asked where she was. Westeros, Lyanna answered, questions flooding her mind. What was that thing in the sky? And who is this woman? Who are you? Long story short, Buffy replied as the couple stared at her in silence. After a brief pause, she shook her head. Okay then. The short version is that I'm here from another world, chasing a monster that kills people. Now, have either of you seen anything weird out here? Other than me, I mean. Rhaegar and Lyanna could only stare at her. Oh, my name's Buffy, by the way, she added. Well, anything? The army of the dead. With one half of the legendary sword Excalibur in his hand, Collin was hurled out of the breach and landed on his feet before a vast army of dead men, women, children, animals, and giants. His fangs extended, his eyes turned yellow as he tightened his grip on the sword and faced the halted horde. He growled at the figures in his line of sight before looking up at a piercing screech from above. A dragon with damaged wings and glowing blue eyes soared overhead. Collin watched as it banked left, its rider staring directly down at him with the same eerie glow. All Collin could do was sneer as he tightened his grip on his half of Excalibur. To be continued.